He bought an old ship on an asteroid for half a credit. The Federation was stunned. The asteroid was small, barren, and dusty. It hung in a quiet corner of space, far from the bustling trade routes and shiny cities of the Federation. Most ships that passed by didn't even bother to slow down. To anyone else, it looked empty, dead, and useless. But to Jaren, it was perfect. Jaren was human, young, and curious. Unlike most species, humans loved looking for possibilities where others saw nothing. They saw patterns, opportunities, and hidden potential. Today, he was hunting for one of those opportunities. He floated down from his small transport pod, landing lightly on the uneven surface of the asteroid. His boots kicked up fine gray dust as he walked toward the auction yard. The yard was a strange sight. Old ships of every size and shape sat in rows, some tilted, some half buried in dust, others with panels missing or engines stripped. A few aliens milled around, inspecting the ships with disinterested expressions. Most were experts in the field, officials from the Federation, or wealthy traders. They looked at the wrecks with critical eyes, noting flaws, missing parts, and obsolete technology. Jaren, on the other hand, didn't see trash. He saw stories. Every dent, scratch, and missing panel told him what the ship had survived. Every rusted pipe hinted at possibilities for repair. Humans had a strange talent for this. They could see value beyond appearances. The auctioneer, a tall insectoid with multiple eyes, stood on a raised platform rattling off ship descriptions. Ship 47, old freighter, model K-12. Engines partially functional.
Hull weakened. Estimated value, 200 credits.
Bids start at 1 credit. A few aliens nodded and whispered among themselves.
200 credits was nothing for a standard freighter, but it was still enough for these seasoned traders to care. Most of them assumed no one would risk buying a rusty old ship. Jaren raised his hand. "Half a credit," he said calmly. His voice was quiet, but there was certainty in it. A hush fell over the crowd. Half a credit? For this freighter? The auctioneer's multiple eyes blinked in confusion. "Did you say half a credit, human?" he asked, voice cracking slightly. "Yes," Jaren replied. "Half a credit!" Laughter rippled through the audience. One wealthy trader, a tall reptilian with scales that glinted under the asteroid's weak sunlight, laughed so loudly it echoed across the yard. "Are you serious? This ship is practically dead!" "Half a credit? Even my hatchling wouldn't waste that." Jaren smiled faintly. No one else knew what he knew. The ship was old, yes. Its engines were tired, its hull corroded, and its control panels scratched and faded. But it was not useless. Not to him. He had a vision for it. A vision that required patience, creativity, and a little stubbornness. Humans excelled at that. The auctioneer hesitated. "Starting bid, half a credit," he finally announced, his tone half question, half disbelief. No other hand went up. The crowd snickered and murmured, certain this human would fail spectacularly. Jaren handed over a single coin. It wasn't much, but in his hands it was enough. The coin clinked softly as it landed on the auctioneer's platform, a small symbol of human audacity, unnoticed by most. The auctioneer tapped his clawed foot. "Sold to the human." A murmur went through the crowd. Some shook their heads. Some muttered curses under their breath. One by one, the officials from the Federation scribbled notes, confused. Why would a human waste resources on an ancient, half-broken freighter? Humans were known for being curious, yes, but this seemed reckless. Jaren, however, was already walking toward his prize. The freighter sat at the edge of the yard, half buried in asteroid dust, its once shiny hull dull and scratched. The engines were rusty, the cargo bay creaked when touched, and several panels hung loosely from the sides. Most of the alien bidders wouldn't even consider touching it. To them, it was garbage. To Jaren, it was opportunity. He ran his hand along the hull, feeling every dent and scratch. He could almost hear the ship's story, where it had traveled, the storms it had survived, the countless deliveries it had made. It had history. It had life. And he had plans. The human's eyes sparkled with excitement. Where others saw decay, he saw potential. Where others saw the end, he saw the beginning. He already imagined the engines repaired and optimized. He imagined the cargo bays cleaned and reorganized. He imagined systems that could adapt, improvise, and function far better than they were designed to. Federation officials followed behind him, notebook claws clacking as they took notes. One of them, a tall, blue-skinned humanoid with wide eyes, whispered to his companion.
Humans! I don't understand them. Why would they buy this? It's worthless.
His companion shrugged. It's human nature, I suppose.
They are curious, stubborn, and sometimes clever,
but mostly reckless.
Jaren ignored them.
He had work to do. He climbed into the freighter, the interior dusty and dim. Panels hung crookedly, and a faint smell of old fuel lingered. The control deck was scratched, the screens flickering weakly. Yet, as he ran his hands over the controls, he felt the possibilities. Every broken panel could be fixed.
Every outdated circuit could be repurposed. Every engine component could be tuned.
Humans had an odd talent. They didn't just repair, they reinvented. They didn't just fix what was broken, they made it better. And Jaren intended to do exactly that. Hours passed.
Dust hung in the freighter like a quiet ghost.
Jaren cleaned panels, checked wires, and made notes. He didn't just see problems, he saw solutions, ways to combine old tech with creative modifications. The aliens outside whispered, noting his methods. They were baffled. Other species relied on standard protocols, manuals, and precise steps. Humans? They relied on instinct, creativity, and curiosity. Jaren paused to look at the engines. They were tired, worn, and outdated, but they had a strange resilience. He traced the worn pipes, the faded markings, the uneven welds. "You've got potential," he murmured to the freighter. "I'll get you running like new." Night fell on the asteroid, turning the dusty rocks a muted silver. Jaren stayed inside the ship, working by faint light. He repaired minor circuits, cleaned engines, and began reorganizing the control deck. Slowly, the ship began to hum with life again, not in full strength yet, but enough to feel its heartbeat. Outside, Federation officials shook their heads. They had seen many species buy old ships, but humans were different. Their approach wasn't just about value or efficiency. Humans thought differently. They adapted, improvised, and believed in possibilities others couldn't see. By the time Jaren stepped out of the freighter, he was covered in dust and grime. He smiled faintly. The freighter was old, yes, but alive. It was not just a relic. It was a challenge. And humans loved challenges. The officials finally approached, curiosity overcoming skepticism.
"Human," one said. "Why this ship?"
It's ancient, nearly useless.
Jaren looked at them calmly. "It's not useless," he said simply. "It just needs a little patience, a little thought, and some creativity. Humans are good at that." They exchanged confused glances.
"Patience, thought, creativity," the alien murmured.
"That doesn't compute. They are just a single human." Jaren shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe humans just see what others can't." And with that, he walked back into the freighter, the first step in a journey that would change how the galaxy viewed humans forever. The auction yard emptied slowly. Aliens left, whispering about the reckless human. Federation officials made reports, still unsure how to categorize him. The freighter sat quietly on the asteroid, old but not defeated. It had a new purpose. Jaren sat in the captain's chair, hands resting on controls, eyes shining with anticipation. In his mind, he was already rebuilding, rethinking, and redesigning.
This was more than a purchase. It was the beginning of a story that no one, not even the Federation, could ignore. Because humans always found a way. The freighter sat quietly on the dusty asteroid, its hull battered, its engines tired, and its systems half dead. To any alien passing by, it seemed abandoned and worthless. But Jaren, the young human, saw something else.
a canvas. The freighter was a puzzle, a machine with problems begging to be solved. And Jaren loved puzzles. He floated inside the cargo bay, careful not to bump into hanging panels or loose wires. His eyes scanned the freighter's interior like a detective reading a crime scene. Every scratch, every dent, every burned-out circuit told him what had gone wrong and, more importantly, what could be made right.
Humans had a way of seeing beyond damage. They could imagine what others could not.
Jaren started with the engines. They were old. Fuel lines corroded, pipes cracked, and thrusters uneven. Most species would have discarded the engines entirely, but Jaren crouched near the core, gently touching the worn metal.
"You're tired, but you've got heart,"
he murmured. With careful hands, he began disassembling parts, inspecting each piece. Some were beyond repair, yes, but many could be cleaned, adjusted, or repurposed. Unlike other species, humans didn't just follow manuals.
"Jaren didn't have one for this freighter,"
he improvised. He combined old circuits with new ones scavenged from other derelict machines he had collected on the asteroid. He replaced fuel lines with lighter, flexible pipes and redesigned the thruster system to run smoother with less energy.
Outside the freighter, alien observers watched in disbelief.
Federation inspectors had come to see the humans' progress. They expected failure.
They had watched him buy the ship for half a credit and assumed it would collapse under human hands. They had been wrong.
Already, the freighter's core systems hummed faintly, a sound no one expected from such an ancient ship. A blue-skinned official whispered to his companion.
How? How is he doing this? He has no proper tools, no manual, nothing. The companion shrugged. It's human intuition. They think differently. I've read about it, but seeing it, it's unsettling. Humans had a peculiar talent. They combined curiosity with stubbornness. If something didn't work, they didn't give up. They tried a dozen new ways, learning with each attempt. Jaren exemplified this. When a circuit failed, he didn't complain. He studied it, twisted it, combined it with other parts, and eventually it worked better than before. Next, he moved to the control deck. The screens flickered, some barely showing static. The buttons were worn smooth, panels scratched. Jaren didn't panic. He cleaned the controls, rewired broken connections, and even modified the software. By the end of the day, the freighter could respond to commands more efficiently than it had in decades. "What is he doing?" one inspector asked, his claws tapping nervously. The companion sighed. "He's thinking." Humans aren't like us. They see solutions where there are none.
As night fell on the asteroid, Jaren worked alone, lit by a small lamp that cast long shadows across the dusty freighter. He didn't need rest yet. He felt alive, connected to the ship, understanding it in ways others never could. For humans, work could be an adventure. Challenges were opportunities, and no obstacle was too big when the mind refused to quit. He tested the cargo bay next. Panels rattled, compartments jammed, and lifts groaned. But Jaren applied human logic and creativity. He replaced broken lifts with improvised pulley systems, lubricated the doors, and even reorganized compartments to maximize efficiency.
By morning, the cargo bay opened smoothly, ready for any load. The alien inspectors were now openly confused.
They had expected a disaster, a wreck that would collapse within days, but the freighter was alive, humming with a quiet energy, responding to Jaren's commands, adapting as he tested it. One inspector muttered, It's working. Somehow, it's actually working." Jaren smiled faintly, not looking up. He knew the real work was just beginning. The ship wasn't just repaired, it was improving. He had redesigned some systems to be smarter, to adapt to changes without manual intervention.
If a panel failed, the ship could reroute energy. If a thruster faltered, others could compensate. No alien ship had this level of improvisation built in. Most species relied on manuals, procedures, and strict designs. Humans relied on creativity. By midday, Jaren had moved to the freighter's exterior.
The hull was scratched and dented, the paint faded. He didn't have enough new panels to replace them all, so he improvised. He reinforced weak areas with recycled metal strips, polished other sections to reduce friction in the vacuum, and even painted simple markings that helped him identify sections for quick repair. To the human eye, the freighter looked messy, but it was functional, efficient, and unique. Federation officials scratched their heads.
"It looks strange," one said, "but somehow it seems ready." Jaren didn't stop there.
He climbed into the navigation systems, adjusting old sensors that had long been considered obsolete. He calibrated them with unusual precision, improving their detection range and accuracy. By evening, the freighter could sense small objects in space that most newer ships would miss. It wasn't just repaired, it was upgraded. There, he paused for a moment, looking at the freighter. Dust covered his hair. Scratches stained his hands, but his eyes were bright. He could feel the ship responding to his modifications. It was almost as if the freighter understood that it had been given a second chance. Humans had a strange way of connecting with machines. They didn't just fix them. They inspired them. The alien inspectors had grown silent. They couldn't believe what they were witnessing.
Most species would have failed to repair the ship in 100 years. One human, with nothing but ingenuity and stubbornness, had done in a few days what others couldn't even imagine.
By the third day, the engines hummed smoothly. The control deck responded instantly.
The cargo bay functioned perfectly. Sensors were online, navigation precise, and every system Jaren touched had improved.
The freighter, once considered a worthless relic, was now functional, smart, and surprisingly resilient. A Federation official finally spoke aloud, unable to contain his curiosity.
"Human, how did you do this? Where others see junk, you see what?"
Jaren leaned against a railing, wiping sweat from his brow.
"Potential," he said simply, "and a chance to make things better. Humans, we don't see limits. We see possibilities. If something can be fixed, improved, or made clever, we'll find a way."
The alien inspectors exchanged uncertain glances. They had studied humans for decades, but had never fully understood them. This freighter was proof that humans were not just physically adaptable. They were creative, stubborn, and inventive in ways no protocol could teach. Jaren wasn't done yet. There were still tweaks to make, systems to test, and upgrades to try. But already, the freighter had transformed. It could fly, maneuver, and respond to changes far better than any other ship of its age. By the fourth day, word had spread across the asteroid. Other aliens came to see the human and his freighter. Traders whispered, "That half-credit human, he's actually doing it." Scientists took notes, studying his modifications. Even engineers from the Federation began to question what they thought they knew about technology. Jaren didn't care about the attention. He was focused on one thing, making the freighter the best it could be. Humans didn't work for praise. They worked for challenges, for understanding, for the satisfaction of turning something ordinary into something extraordinary. As he climbed into the captain's chair, running simulations for the first trial flight, he smiled. The freighter was ready.
Not just ready to move, but ready to surprise the galaxy.
The alien inspectors left quietly, still confused.
"Humans, they're unlike anything we've ever seen," one said. "They're reckless, yes, but somehow brilliant."
Jaren didn't hear them. He was already plotting his first journey, imagining how the freighter would perform in space, how it would respond to obstacles, how it would adapt in ways no alien ship could. Because humans, he thought, always saw more than what was in front of them. They saw what could be. And in the galaxy, sometimes, that made all the difference. The freighter floated silently on the asteroid's surface, gleaming faintly under the soft light of distant stars.
Its hull was polished, engines tuned, sensors calibrated. Jaren stood before it, hands on his hips, eyes bright with excitement.
He had worked tirelessly for days, fixing, upgrading, and improving. Now, it was ready for its first real test, not just repairs, but a demonstration of what humans could do when others doubted them. The galaxy, however, had a way of testing humans sooner than they expected. A sudden alert came through the communication panel. A nearby colony, tucked inside an asteroid belt not far from the Federation's border, was in danger. A swarm of high-speed meteors had broken off from a passing comet and was heading straight for the settlement. The colony's shields were weak, and the few Federation ships in the sector were tied up elsewhere. Officials panicked. "There's no ship available in time," one said, pacing nervously. "The colony will be destroyed." Jaren, listening quietly from his freighter, smiled faintly. He stood tall and spoke calmly. "I can help." The officer stared at him. "You! That freighter?" One gasped. "It's ancient, barely functional. It's human." "Humans! Humans are fragile!" Jaren shook his head. "Humans are adaptable. We can try solutions no one else will consider." The aliens hesitated, but time was short. The colony needed help, and all standard options were busy. With little choice, they allowed Jaren to launch. Inside the freighter, the control panels flickered as Jaren ran pre-flight checks. Systems responded smoothly. Thrusters hummed steadily. Sensors scanned the nearby asteroid field, calculating trajectories for incoming meteors. He could feel the freighter responding to him. It wasn't just a machine. It was an extension of his mind. Humans had a way of connecting with machines that other species rarely achieved. As he left the asteroid, he accelerated carefully, dodging smaller rocks with ease. The freighter felt alive under his hands, anticipating his moves, adjusting to changes in real time. For a moment, he thought about how many species would have given up on a ship like this. Yet here he was, moving faster than most Federation freighters, performing tasks they hadn't imagined possible. The asteroid belt approached, a deadly maze of spinning rocks and meteors. Jaren focused. He wasn't worried. He never was. Humans had an unusual gift. When faced with danger, they didn't panic. They adapted. The freighter weaved through the rocks, engines humming, shields flexing to deflect smaller impacts. Every movement was precise but fluid, as if the ship itself were alive. Meanwhile, Federation observers monitored from afar, their jaws dropping. "Look at that human," one exclaimed. "He's navigating it perfectly. That freighter, it shouldn't be able to do this." Jaren didn't hear them. He had too much to focus on. Large meteors approached the colony, threatening buildings and energy cores. He adjusted his course, angling the freighter to create a protective shield with its own mass. The freighter's thrusters fired precisely, pushing smaller rocks away, deflecting the trajectory of others. No alien pilot would have dared such maneuvers. Most species relied on brute force or rigid strategy. Humans relied on creativity, quick thinking, and instinct. That combination allowed Jaren to do what the experts considered impossible. Inside the freighter, the cargo bay doors opened. Jaren deployed emergency stabilizers, portable energy shields, and repurposed mining drones to reinforce the colony's defense. The drones moved automatically, guided by systems Jaren had modified. They nudged meteors off course, redirected falling debris, and stabilized critical infrastructure. The colony's inhabitants watched in awe. They had been terrified moments ago, and now a single human flying an ancient freighter was saving them. His movements were calm, precise, confident. Human confidence, the kind that relied on thought, not just strength. Back in the observation station, Federation officials scrambled to make sense of it. "This can't be happening," one muttered. "That ship, it shouldn't have enough speed or maneuverability. Yet it's saving the colony." Another official shook his head. "It's the human. Look at him."
He's improvising, adjusting in ways our ships can't.
No protocol, no manual, just instinct and intelligence. Jaren piloted the freighter through the storm, using every upgrade he had installed. The thrusters redistributed energy to adapt to shifting debris. Sensors detected changes in meteor speed and direction, instantly rerouting shields. The control deck displayed multiple simulations, and yet Jaren handled it all simultaneously, as if the freighter were an extension of his own mind. A massive meteor threatened the colony's main reactor. Jaren calculated the angle, speed, and momentum. He fired a small auxiliary thruster, nudging the freighter's hull just enough to collide gently with the meteor. The rock broke apart into harmless fragments, each deflected safely away.
Humans often found simple solutions to complex problems, solutions that no one else could see. The colony's energy shields began to stabilize. The buildings stood and the panic slowly turned to awe.
People cheered, waving at the freighter as it hovered nearby, humming quietly. Jaren didn't wave back. He focused on his next calculation. As the last meteors passed, the freighter glided safely away from danger. Jaren ran a final scan to ensure the colony was secure. Every system he had installed worked perfectly. The ship had adapted, compensated, and performed beyond expectations. Back at the Federation observation post, officials were speechless.
Their most advanced ships would have failed under such conditions, yet a human in a worthless freighter had succeeded flawlessly.
Whispers began. Maybe humans were not as fragile as believed.
Maybe they were something else entirely. One inspector finally spoke aloud. "This human, he's not just lucky, he's brilliant!"
The freighter, it responded to him. He guided it, adapted it, improved it. Humans think differently.
They solve problems in ways no protocol can predict. Jaren, unaware of the astonishment behind him, piloted the freighter back to the asteroid where he had purchased it. The journey had been difficult, but it proved his point. Humans were underestimated, yes, but they could do extraordinary things when others doubted them. When he landed, the freighter rested quietly, almost proud of what it had done. Jaren stepped out, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked at the stars and smiled. Humans had a way of surprising the galaxy. They didn't need advanced technology or large armies to succeed. They needed creativity, persistence, and a refusal to give up. The Federation officials approached cautiously. Human. "We need to understand what just happened," one said. "That freighter, it shouldn't have been able to do that." "And yet it did." "You did." Jaren shrugged, a small smile on his face. "I just saw what needed to be done and tried it. Humans are good at finding solutions." The officials looked at each other. They had studied humans for decades, but no observation, no report, and no protocol could explain what they had just witnessed. Humans didn't think like other species. They didn't follow rigid rules. They adapted, improvised, and turned challenges into opportunities. News of the event spread quickly across the asteroid belt and into nearby Federation systems. Traders, engineers, and scientists shared stories of the human and his freighter, marveling at the ingenuity and courage displayed. The half-credit purchase that everyone had mocked was now legendary. Jaren didn't bask in glory. For him, this was only the beginning. Humans thrived on challenges, and he had proven to himself, and to the galaxy, that obstacles were simply opportunities in disguise. He climbed back into the freighter, running systems checks and minor improvements, already thinking of the next journey. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. Perhaps now they would begin to pay attention. Because when humans saw a problem, they didn't just try to solve it, they redefined it, reshaped it, and turned it into a success no one could have imagined. And that freighter, once a forgotten relic, was proof. The freighter floated silently on the asteroid's surface, its engines warm and thrumming after the recent trial. Jaren sat in the captain's chair, leaning back and stretching. The colony had been saved, the meteors deflected, and the freighter had performed beyond any expectations. To Jaren, it was simply what humans did. See a problem, find a solution, and adapt. But the galaxy was watching. News traveled fast. Traders passing through nearby systems told tales of a human in an old freighter saving an entire colony from a deadly meteor storm. Scientists and engineers shared diagrams and sketches trying to understand how such a simple ship could perform feats that advanced Federation vessels struggled to achieve. Even politicians and bureaucrats took notice, scrambling to analyze what had happened. The phrase repeated endlessly across Federation channels. A human in a half-credit freighter saved a colony. Many dismissed it at first as exaggeration or luck. But more reports came, more details emerged, and skepticism slowly gave way to astonishment. A delegation of Federation officials arrived at the asteroid. They were serious, professional,
and unusually quiet. They had expected to see a wreck, a human who had failed spectacularly, or at best, a lucky outcome that couldn't be repeated. Instead, they found Jaren polishing panels, running minor tweaks on the freighter, and making notes for further improvements. The head of the delegation, a tall, pale-skinned humanoid with a long, elegant neck, spoke carefully.
Human, we must understand.
How did you achieve what no other ship could? No one in the Federation expected a freighter like this, nor a human like you, to succeed. Jaren smiled faintly. I didn't do anything special. I just saw what needed to be done, and I did it. Humans, we see solutions where others see problems. That's all.
The delegation was not satisfied with a simple answer. They studied the freighter, inspected the engines, analyzed the control systems, and questioned Jaren for hours. He explained his modifications, his upgrades, and his methods. Slowly, they realized that he hadn't just repaired the ship, he had transformed it. He had taken something old, broken, and abandoned, and made it adaptive, resilient, and clever. One of the engineers, a multi-limbed alien with precise fingers, shook his head in disbelief.
He didn't just fix it. He improved it beyond design limits. How is this possible?
The answer was simple, though no alien could fully grasp it. Humans were stubborn. Humans were curious.
Humans thought differently. While other species relied on manuals, protocols, or simulations, humans relied on creativity, instinct, and imagination.
Jaren's freighter was proof that humans could innovate in ways others could not. Word of the human success spread across the galaxy. Traders stopped by the asteroid asking questions, offering old tech to see what Jaren could do with it. Scientists studied his methods, fascinated by his unconventional approaches. Engineers wanted to learn human improvisation, human adaptability, human problem-solving. The half-credit freighter had become legendary.
Even the colony's leaders sent messages of gratitude.
They described how Jaren's freighter had not only saved lives, but had performed tasks no standard Federation ship could accomplish. Your courage and ingenuity are unmatched, one message read.
Humans may be underestimated, but we now know the truth. Jaren didn't take pride in the recognition. Humans rarely worked for praise.
For him, success was measured by results, by what had been accomplished. He had proven that humans could adapt, innovate, and overcome obstacles even when underestimated. As days passed, more visitors arrived. Federation officials came, not to judge, but to observe and learn.
Engineers wanted to understand how Jaren had modified the ship's systems to be adaptive. Scientists asked about human decision-making processes and intuition. Traders sought advice on efficient resource use. Everywhere he went, humans inspired curiosity, admiration, and sometimes a little fear.
Jaren continued to work on the freighter, improving systems further. He added upgrades that allowed the ship to optimize fuel usage automatically. He created adaptive shields that responded to threats without constant manual input. He redesigned the sensors to detect even the smallest debris in space.
Each improvement was simple, clever, and effective, exactly how humans worked. One afternoon, as he adjusted a control panel, an official asked, "Human, why do you do this? Why spend time on such small improvements when the galaxy has so many advanced ships and technology?"
Jaren leaned back and looked out the viewport at the stars.
Because humans see potential. Every problem has a solution. Every ship, every machine, every challenge, there's always a way to make it better. We don't give up, and we don't wait for perfect conditions. We try, we adapt, and we keep going.
The official nodded slowly. It was a lesson the Federation had underestimated for centuries. They had relied on power rules and technology, thinking that structure and protocol were everything. Humans proved them wrong. Over time, Jaren's freighter became more than a ship. It became a symbol of human ingenuity, adaptability, and perseverance. Young humans across colonies looked up to it, inspired to take on challenges themselves. Other species began to study humans differently, realizing that they were not fragile, not weak, but capable of extraordinary things when underestimated.
One day, Jaren received a message from a distant Federation academy. They invited him to share his methods, to teach engineers and pilots how humans approached problems.
He smiled quietly. Humans rarely sought recognition, but sometimes recognition was a tool to inspire others. He traveled to the academy, the freighter moving smoothly, responding effortlessly to his commands. Students and instructors alike watched in awe. Jaren demonstrated simple repairs, creative solutions, and adaptive problem-solving. He explained how humans combined observation, intuition, and imagination. Every lesson was simple yet revolutionary. By the time he finished, the Academy's leaders were humbled.
Human ingenuity, it's beyond our models, our calculations. We must rethink how we teach, how we design ships, how we approach challenges, one said.
Jaren didn't respond. He simply looked at the freighter and nodded.
Humans didn't need validation. They only needed the chance to try. Back on the asteroid, the freighter rested quietly, its hull polished, systems humming, ready for the next adventure.
Jaren stood nearby, gazing at the stars. He thought about the colony, the Federation officials, the engineers and scientists who had marveled at human creativity. And he thought about the future. Humans had always been underestimated. Their small size, fragile bodies, and reliance on simple tools often made other species doubt them. But time and again, humans had shown that strength was not always physical. Ingenuity, persistence, and adaptability could achieve more than brute force ever could. The galaxy was beginning to understand. Humans were different. Humans were clever. Humans could turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. And they did it quietly, without boasting, simply because it was in their nature. As the asteroid sun dipped behind distant mountains, Jaren climbed back into the freighter. Systems checked, engines warmed, and sensors scanned the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, new challenges awaited: asteroid fields, derelict ships, colonies in need, and mysteries that no one else could solve. And he would face them all, because that was what humans did. They faced the unknown, adapted, and thrived. They were stubborn, clever, and unstoppable when underestimated. And in a galaxy full of rules, regulations, and advanced technology, humans were the wild card, the species no one had fully understood until now. Jaren smiled. The freighter hummed beneath him, ready. The galaxy might have doubted humans, but it had learned a lesson it would never forget. Never underestimate what a human could do with curiosity, determination, and a little creativity.
And the story of the half-credit freighter would be told for generations, a testament to human ingenuity and the simple truth that humans always found a way. Because humans, in the quietest and cleverest ways, were extraordinary,